How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard, and this is a show about wrestling. Happy Halloween, Leonard.
Happy Halloween to you, Chad. As we're recording this on Halloween night.
Right. So you might be listening to it well after that. And as such, we are going to be doing a rebook, and we are rebooking Halloween Havoc 1995, brought to you by World Championship Wrestling. And before we get into our rebooks, let's go over the event as it stands, which was the seventh annual Halloween Havoc event, and it took place October 29th, 1995, from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. And that was the second consecutive year that it took place there. The cover showed of the VHS showed Hulk Hogan squeezing or trying to squeeze like a fake looking pumpkin. It looked like the pre-show was WCW main event, and there were 4 matches on that. We start with Eddie Guerrero defeating Disco Inferno, Paul Orndorff defeating the Renegade, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko defeating the Blue Bloods of Lord Steven Regal and Earl Robert Eaton, and Craig Pittman defeating VK Wall Street. The main card begins with Johnny B. Bad defeating Diamond Dallas Page, who's with Diamond Doll and Max Muscle, for the WCW World Television Championship. 17 minutes and 1 second. Randy Savage defeats the Zodiac in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Kurosawa with Colonel Robert Parker defeats Road Warrior Hawk in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Sabu with the Sheik defeats Mr. JL in 3 minutes and 25 seconds. Lex Luger defeats Ming by disqualification in 13 minutes and 14 seconds. Sting and Ric Flair defeat Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson by disqualification, 17 minutes and 9 seconds. Hulk Hogan defeats the Giant in the Sumo Monster Truck match. Randy Savage defeats Lex Luger in 5 minutes and 23 seconds. And then the Giant, who's with the Taskmaster, defeats Hulk Hogan with Jimmy Hart by disqualification. That match was for the World Heavyweight Championship, 14 minutes, 30 seconds. So, Leonard, what did you think of the pay-per-view?
So, I don't always rewatch the pay-per-views when we do the rebooks because I'm familiar enough with them and I just look at the cards and such. But I recently have been rewatching some of the older Halloween Havocs. So I did rewatch this one. And just going over the match listing doesn't really tell you all of the stuff that was going on here. I found the pay-per-view largely forgettable outside of the god-awful stuff that was going on between Hulk Hogan and the Giant. The sumo truck thing is long and boring and weird. And the match itself, you have the Yeti, as Tony Schiavone likes to call him, running in, and it's such a schmoz at the end of the show. And that just eclipses everything else, which is largely forgettable. Savage and Luger had to win preliminary matches to fight each other later on, but I don't think it's ever said why that had to happen. You also have Ric Flair turned on Sting in the tag match, and I love that angle. But here's how overshadowing the Hogan Giant stuff is. I thought that was a different pay-per-view. I didn't realize that happened here. I thought that was the September show or the November show. So that's a significant angle there. And for me, the best match on the card was probably DDP versus Johnny B. Bad. I would give that maybe 3.25 stars. That was a pretty good match, and Bad got a nice pop for winning it. So outside of the Giant Hogan stuff, which is god awful, and the Savage Luger stuff, which doesn't make sense, it's just a bag of nothing largely.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I probably would agree with you as far as the best match on the card goes. The Johnny B. Bad DDP match went a lot longer than I expected it to, but it was pretty solid for what it was. And yeah, I mean, the Giant dies here and then comes back into.
He falls completely off the building, and I believe I think it might have been Heenan tried to save it that he landed in the river, but if he did, why isn't he wet?
Right. And the Yeti sexually assaults Hulk Hogan in the middle of the ring, I'm pretty sure. is what.
Yes, Hogan is the middle of a giant Yeti sandwich.
Like it's so. Even on Wikipedia, it says about the Yeti's involvement in one of the most awkward moments in pro wrestling history.
Yeah. Yes, I believe that if I remember correctly, I believe the Yeti is Ron Reese.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like you said, this card has a lot of nothing on it. Kurosawa was a wrestler in Japan, but it had a different name there. And you have Sabu and Mr. JL, who is Jerry Lynn, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
And they have for 3 minutes and 25 seconds, they have a solid match, but it's style and moves that the crowd clearly was not used to seeing. The storyline at the time, I remember as a kid thinking the idea of Andre the Giant having a son coming to attack Hulk Hogan sounds silly and interesting, but the way it's executed here is just ridiculous with the monster truck, and then the match itself is, like you said, a schmoz. Paul White was, greener than goose shit at this stage of his career. So, yeah, this was not a great period for WCW, which is why, in the next year you would see Hogan turn heel, and there's shades of that here, him dressing in all black.
Yes, because he was fighting with the Dungeon of Doom, and the idea was that he had to cross over to the darkness to fight them, and that's why he was dressing all black, and he shaved his mustache, and he did all that stuff. And then, of course, it would come out later. He would go back to the yellow and red, and it would be revealed that the Zodiac was a double agent and working for Hogan the whole time, and that everything was a ruse, and nothing meant anything.
Right, and I'm pretty sure Leonard crosses over to the darkness to do this show every week. That's
every week. I crawl into a bottle right beforehand, and then I crawl out of it for this.
All right, yeah. So we agree that this event needs to be rebooked, and if I recall correctly, Leonard, I have one more match than you.
I believe I have 10 matches. I think you said you had 11. And of course, we always have stipulations when we do these rebooks. And I came up with 3 of them. One is that you have to have a spin the wheel, make the deal match. It was something that I believe they only did twice, but it's just the original run of Halloween Havoc. Of course, it came back at NXT. But it's so ingrained with these pay-per-views. I thought it would be fun to have a spin the wheel, make the deal match. You also have to have something Halloween-ish, since this is Halloween Havoc. It could be the spin the wheel, make the deal match. It could be something else. And since main event was a part of things, you have to rebook main event as well, at least 2 matches on main event. And while we've done dark matches before in our past rebooks, I don't think we've ever done a pre-show.
Right, that's true. So yeah, so I'll get started here. I have 4 matches on my pre-show, the main event show. And the first one I have up here is Brian Pillman versus Eddie Guerrero. And this is a match that would happen in 1996 at one of the Clash of the Champions. They would face each other, but it didn't happen quite yet at this juncture. So I think, any amount of times that you have these two face each other, it's bound to be interesting and good. Eddie Guerrero is young here. Brian Pillman could still go at this point, and I think it would have been fun to see this on main event. And that's, my first 2 matches on main event are really the only reason I have them there is because I think it would be fun to see, and they'd be good matches. So.
And we've talked before, and it's kind of like what I did with my first match. Is you want something that is fast paced, that is action packed to get the people woke up and going. And again, Guerrero and Pillman, I think in this period, were both really kind of coming into their own as workers. Not that they weren't good before this, but this 95, 97 in that ballpark, they were both great. So yeah, as just a good match, that's a good pick. I like that. And for my first match, I actually used Eddie Guerrero too, but before that, I have a segment to kind of set up some stuff. So if you watched in real life, Halloween Havoc showed footage from a previous Saturday night WCW Saturday Night, where Sting was going to defend the U.S. title against Johnny B. Bad, who didn't show up. So Pillman got the match. And then Bad, it was revealed later that he had his tires slashed by DDP and Max Muscle. So I would recap this, and then I have Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman come out and say, due to WCW, bylaws, a loophole, because Pillman was a substitute opponent. That wasn't technically a title match. Sting hasn't defended the U.S. title in 30 days, and he should be stripped of it if he doesn't defend it that night. And they believe Pillman should get the match, and the tag match with them against Flair and Sting be called off. Now, Sting might have defended the belt at other points. Doesn't matter. Retcon that out. And then I would have Nick Bockwinkel come out as the WCW commissioner. He hadn't been on TV for a while at this point, but he was still around, I believe, in the back. And he would say that the board has decided we're going to have a triple spin the wheel stipulation for the main event, which I'll get to later. And then we're going to have another wheel of guys on the roster. And the first spin will be Sting's opponent for the U.S. title. And the second spin will be Flair's new partner for the tag match. And I'm going to get to that later. Well, okay. I'll go ahead and tell you now, because I'm going to do that on main event as well. The idea is to load main event with so much good stuff that you want to buy the pay-per-view at the last minute if you're watching from home. Okay. So when it comes to the wheel spin, Sting's going to get Sabu, and Flair gets a question mark, meaning it's a mystery partner chosen by Nick Bockwinkel. And we'll get to that later. So after all that, my first match is going to be Eddie Guerrero versus Mr. JL or Jerry Lynn. Again, both these guys are great workers at this time. The cruiserweight division wouldn't develop yet for a while in WCW, but these guys were working that style. And again, it's a match. And again, I'm pretty sure Guerrero and Lynn linked up in ECW, but I would just match that would be good. That'd be high octane, would wake up the crowd, and a match I'd want to see.
I like it. I can dig that. A triple spin the wheel is interesting to me too. Let me get to my next match before we get to some of my silliness to come later on. I thought about using this guy in a different way, but my next match, I have Big Bubba Rogers versus Dean Malenko. And I don't know if this match happened. Like, I looked up some of these matches, but part of me just thinks that this would be a good match, even though these two might not look like they would have like a mesh of styles. I feel like these styles could potentially go well together. And it doesn't have to be very long, but I had to use Dean Malenko somehow because he's too good not to. So there you have it.
Yeah, I'm picturing the two of them like in the ring with each other, and it is an odd picture just because Malenko is so much smaller than Big Bubba Rogers. But Big Bubba Rogers is a big boss fan. I think he's underrated. He could work with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And I think a guy like Malenko would get a good match out of him. I think he could work with Malenko. So even if this was short, which I guess it would be for main event probably, I like it as a different idea.
All right.
So my second match is a tag team bout. It's going to be the Blue Bloods of William Regal and Robert Eaton versus the American Males of Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Scotty Riggs. So looking up stuff, because I wanted to know who the tag champs were at this time. Harlem Heat had just won the belts back from them on the WCW Saturday Night the night before, even though it had been pre-taped before it aired that Saturday. So I would have the heels win here through face miscommunication and tease a breakup of Riggs and Bagwell following their loss of the tag team titles. And I like Regal and Eaton, and I wanted to give them the win. So that's another reason there.
So yours was the Males versus the Blue Bloods?
Yes.
Yep. Well, we'll get to that later on again on my card.
All right.
My next match is a short squash. Because I felt like the title needed to be dealt with somehow. And I have, for the television championship, Diamond Dallas Page versus Meng. Meng destroys DDP in 30 seconds with a bunch of chops to the throat. And Meng is your new WCW TV champion. That's all. You know what? Meng needed a title. I don't know if he ever really got a good run with a singles title. And why not have him go in, destroy DDP? Maybe he goes home with Diamond Doll, something like that.
I would love to see him just like pick up Kimberly and just walk off with her.
Yeah, who's going to stop him, right?
Yeah, and she's into it though. That would be the thing, because at this point she was like, whoever DDP was against, she was for.
Yes.
Yeah. So she'd be into it. Somehow I thought you were going to like have Ming just whip on somebody. I wasn't sure who it was going to be. I wouldn't have guessed Paige, but yeah, why not put a belt on Ming? I love Ming. I actually wound up only using him as a run-in, although I did want to find something for him, but I only used him for a run-in. So my main event is actually for the WCW television title is Diamond Dallas Page with Max Muscle and Kimberly defending against Johnny B. Bad. So I kept that match, but I moved it to main event because you're giving main event a main event that is worth something, that is meaningful, that is a big time match, again, that might entice some last minute buys. But what I would do is I would have Page go into the ring, say Bad didn't show up again, tease that they slashed his tires again, and then Hulk Hogan rides Bad in on his Harley Davidson motorcycle. So you get Hulk Hogan on the pre-show, pop everybody, and then Bad would go in, and you would have that same match. I think that match is fine. It makes sense for Bad to win. So I am keeping that match, but I'm changing the pre-match kind of stuff, and I'm moving it to the pre-show instead of the main card.
I like that. I thought about keeping that match as it is, but I did change it around. So my next match, if you want to call it, is the craziest thing I have. And you talked about wanting to load up main events so people buy the pay-per-view. Well, I'm gonna give them a doozy here right before the pay-per-view starts, and it's half my own creation. It is a Chamber of Horrors costume contest battle royal. That's what we're doing, Leonard. We're right. There's not a ton of people in it, but everybody who comes in, every character is dressed up like something, and we're gonna see where I'm going with this.
All right.
Zodiac comes in and he's dressed like a barber. Renegade comes in and he's dressed like a warrior. Disco Inferno, he'll dress and act like John Travolta. VK Wall Street will come in looking like an IRS agent. Maybe he's wearing a wrestling jacket as well. Craig Pittman is in it. He's going to dress and act like Sergeant Slaughter. Road Warrior Hawk comes in and he'll have on, Road Warrior animal makeup.
As soon as you said Hawk, I said the gimmick there would be he's dressed like animal.
Yeah. The Nasty Boys are in it, and they're dressed like they're calling themselves the Good Boys in this one, and they're dressed appropriately in suits and ties. So this is going to end up in a massive lawsuit, in some way. But the winner of the costume contest gets to sit in the not the electric chair, but we'll just call it the cage in the middle of the whole thing. And then the winner of the battle royal, those two guys will face each other, and the winner gets to keep their job. That's the prize. That's
you do a loser leaves town or everyone gets fired match every time.
I should not be in charge of a promotion for that reason, because at the end of the year, half of the roster would have lose their jobs or left town. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. And I don't even know who I would have win this, but the crowd would see what was going on. They would see that they're trying to allude to all these other characters, and maybe we have Zodiac or Road Warrior Hawk win it. But
I would say Hawk or Zodiac would probably be the two guys highest up the card as it would be, and would get the most reaction.
I thought about having Big Bubba Rogers come in dressed like a police officer,
yes,
or something like that. I was going to use him for that, but I was like, then I don't have a way to use Dean Malenko. So, so I had to keep that match the way it was. But maybe Big Bubba Rogers comes back for this, just for fun.
Yeah. He can work twice. Why not?
Yeah.
My first main match is actually my Halloween match, and it's a trick or treat street fight.
Oh, damn it. I get one of those too.
So that's a gimmick the WWE would do later on, but it's certainly something
Right.
you could do here because Halloween Havoc has always had pumpkins and tombstones and coffins and stuff lying around. So I would have all that stuff littering around the ring,
Right.
and it would be a fatal four-way between the Renegade, Disco Inferno, Zodiac, and VK Wall Street. So
Okay.
basically, four guys whose regular outfits are basically costumes anyway.
Right.
So they're already dressed for Halloween. Disco would take a pumpkin on the head at some point
Yeah.
and just walk around with a jack-o'-lantern on his head. That would have to happen. It doesn't matter who wins here. I thought about giving it to Wall Street just because, it's Mike Rotundo. Although I think Renegade's the only face, but Renegade's push was completely over by this point. So
Right.
again, it doesn't matter, but I might just have Renegade win since he's the face.
I like that. I like the idea of the match. Maybe not Renegade winning, but anyway. All right. First match on the main card for me: Arn Anderson versus Jushin Thunder Liger.
I
Again,
almost used Liger because I saw he was on the roster, but I decided not to bring him in.
yeah. Again, I don't know if this match happened, and you know what? This might strike them as a clash of styles. But you know what? Arn Anderson to me can work with anyone, and I think these guys could put up a barn burner of a match with like a balance of technical wrestling and high flying skills that I think could really really work well. Similar to some of the guys that Brian Danielson works with these days. Like he'll always bring the technical wrestling, but he doesn't hesitate to get in there with somebody who does some of the more spotty stuff. So that would be my opening match, and yeah, again, just a match that I think would have looked really good either way.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Arn would go for like a ground and pound technique, would try to stop Luke Liger from flying, take his legs out from under him, while Liger would probably get his hope spots in, which would be kind of flashy. I like the idea of that a lot. It's one of those matches I never would have thought of to put together. But I agree with you. I think those guys can work with anybody, and I think it would have been at least a match that if people didn't know about like today and they came across it and they're like, what? They would just need to watch it. So
Right.
that's a cool idea. So my second match, and I need to actually go to my notes now because I don't. I had it all memorized, but I didn't.
You're
Okay, so
trying to
this is
insert your
for
own costume contest, Leonard. I know.
yes. Yes. No, I second match on my main show is for the WCW World Tag Team titles. Harlem Heat or the champs, as I mentioned earlier.
Were
So
they
Booker
the
T,
champs?
they had won the belts off of the American males, from what I had looked up.
Yeah, see, I was trying to put together who had the belts at this point, and like I saw that the males won it like a week later, and that eventually Harlem Heat would take it from them. But like I thought that when I was looking up the timeline that Harlem Heat would get it after this. Either
No,
way,
from what? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
this is a rebook, so it really doesn't matter. But
Right. I can say that they won it, but I had looked and I thought that I had seen, I'll double check that when you go over your next match and I can look a little bit more. So I might have been off on the dates on that. But anyway, in my world, Harlem Heat's got the belts and they're going to defend those titles against Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit. So they were working as a tag team a little bit during this time, as we saw from the real main event that happened. And these are three workers coming into their own at this time. All these guys are getting really good around 95. And not to say anything against Stevie Ray. He always held his own in the tag matches with
oh yeah, I agree.
the T and was the muscle of the team. And I think this is just a really good match. I would maybe have Sherry interfere so you can set up a rematch down the road. I wouldn't take the belts off of Harlem Heat yet. But these is just, I think this would be a surprise match. I think this is a show stealing possible of a match.
Yeah, I agree. I think this would have been a really good match. And I wanted to use Harlem Heat in some way, but when I was looking it up again, it was just a matter of like, oh, if they're not the champs, I really don't know how to use them. So I didn't end up using them, but you used them in a good way. I had thought about using, the other tag team. I didn't for an obvious reason, but yeah, this would be a great match for sure. My next match is for the WCW United States Championship. And
Okay, real quick before you
yeah,
go on, I did look it up, and according to Wikipedia, Harlem Heat won the belts back at a September 27th TV taping for Saturday night, and that taping aired on tape delay on October 28th, 1995. And I believe this show was on the 29th.
yeah, okay, all right. Well, in any event, um, we'll have to do some, imaginative storytelling with my tag match later.
Well, it doesn't again, like we said, doesn't matter.
Yeah, so this is for
You,
the
you,
US.
you can just say that match hadn't aired yet.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
For the United States Championship, it will be Johnny B. Bad versus Sting. And, this match was supposed to happen. Those who watched the original pay per view, and it didn't. But I would have Johnny B. Bad go over here. I would have him beat Sting for the U.S. title. I think that he was much hotter than WCW gave him credit for. They would have him, kind of be the opener on like every pay per view for like a 2-3 year span. It felt
Yeah.
and that's just kind of how they used him. And I think that he deserved a little bit more. Honestly, Leonard, at one point I thought about putting him in the main event. Not as like I thought about incorporating a spin the wheel thing to have him in the main event with Hogan. I toyed with that idea for a while, and then I just decided not to go with it because I couldn't think of how to logically get him there. But in any event, I think that he is good in this spot, and I think he and Sting would have put on a decent match for sure.
Well, I love the idea that you brought back the fact that Bad was owed a U.S. title match and gave him that U.S. title match. I think that is really smart to do. And I agree with you. I think Mark Mara overall was underrated. And I think a lot of people look at that character and they laugh at it, but he was over around this time. And he got a good pop when he won the TV title. So winning the U.S. title, and again, I think you can keep this a face versus face matchup. I think Sting gives him the handshake afterward, that type of thing, and it frees Sting up to be more of a main event guy than your second kind of tier champion.
Right.
And of course, and since you moved the belt off of DDP, they can continue the Bad DDP feud just with the U.S. title. So yeah, so I dig that a lot. I think that was smart using what had already been built. So next up, my next match, I have Macho Man Randy Savage versus Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And I would have Savage come out dressed like Orndorff and Orndorff come out dressed like Savage.
That would be interesting to see.
So as their Halloween costumes, they're dressed as each other. And this is just two guys, older veterans. They had lost a step by this point, but it was a step nobody else had to start with. Just a good, I think, old school match you could have here with these two guys. Again, no storyline here other than the fact, it's funny to have these two guys dressed like the other one. Savage comes out in the Mr. Wonderful robe and Orndorff's got the tie-dye and the cowboy hat and the sunglasses and all that. But this is just, I think, would be just a solid old school type of match. I would have Savage win since he's higher up on the card. And I didn't look it up. I'm sure Savage Orndorff happened at some point in the WWF.
No, they were both heels in WWF, so I wonder if it did.
Yeah, well, Savage was face for a time, after what was it through what 80, most of 88. So I didn't look it up, but it possibly happened, maybe didn't. But we're seeing it here. I just like the idea of putting those two guys together.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a good old school match, and afterwards, I'm definitely going to look up to see if that actually did happen because I'm curious to see what it would have looked like. But yeah, that would have been a good match to see for sure. What would not have been a good match to see is my next match. But there's a reason for it being there, and that is it's Luger versus the Giant.
Okay.
So, they have the Giant debut, and they just kind of come and fast forward him right into a program with Hogan. And I think that was one of the mistakes. And I think that if they had shown you, like they would have done with any monster nowadays, whether you're talking about WWE, AEW, or whatever company, you have these monsters debut and prove themselves, show them destroying people, so then it makes sense for them to get a title shot against whoever. So that's what I would have done here. Before you getting to Hogan, well, one of the, faces of WCW for years and years and years, have him come in and just annihilate Lex Luger. It doesn't have to be a squash, but you could have Lex Luger put up a fight, but just the fight that he's putting up is of somebody who's just is unable to overcome the awesome size and power of the Giant. That would be my storyline for this match. I'd have the Giant go over cleanly, and then have him deliver a promo, or have Taskmaster deliver a promo, whoever in the ring, showing that the Giant has his sights set on Hogan. I think it would make more sense to have him wrestle a little bit more.
Yeah, I like that idea. That does make sense to me. It's not what I did, but yeah, you're probably in the right there. That you needed to build the Giant up more before getting to that Hogan match. So that's a smart way to do that. While you were talking, I did look it up very quickly, and apparently Randy Savage and Paul Orndorff had some house show matches back in 1986, including at the Philly Spectrum, which I'm finding. And they had a match on September 2nd of 1995, part of Worldwide. So the C show for WCW.
Are they on YouTube, or you just looked on like Cage Match?
No, I quickly just did a quick Google search, and the Worldwide match is listed as being on YouTube. So maybe we can watch that and do a match, analysis of that. Yeah. And apparently also, which is on YouTube, Paul Orndorff and Tito Santana versus Randy Savage and Bob Orton.
That's a collective there, isn't it?
Yeah, which probably would have been, I would guess, later 85.
All right.
So maybe we can watch both those matches for the future.
Absolutely.
So my next match, much like yours, is one that probably people won't want to see, and it is Lex Luger versus Road Warrior Hawk. Originally, I was going to have Hawk go against Ming here to use Ming, but I figured you got to get Luger on the show.
Right.
And this was two big meaty guys slapping meat back and forth, no selling everything, all kinds of power moves. Keep it short, and you can still have the storyline if Luger is a secret member of the Dungeon of Doom. I would have Ming do a run-in and interfere, or have Luger not want it, but wins through the interference and doesn't like it. But you can set up Hawk and Ming for the future then by doing that. So this was just two guys I thought needed to be on the card, and they're not known to be great technical workers. So let's put them against each other and make something quick out of it.
Yeah, I don't know if it will be a pretty match, but you did use the word meat a lot in describing.
Yeah, yes, a meaty match.
Which, I'm not sure how I feel about the use of the terminology, but no, match would be what it is. Hulk had a bunch of singles matches. He had one against Flair at one point, and so like he could certainly have a solo career. Luger, you kind of had to be somebody that was a really good worker to do stuff with him. So yeah, this might not be the best match, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
My next match would be my WCW Tag Team Championship match, and as I'm thinking about it, the concept that I used here, you really could put, ultimately it's against the Blue Bloods. So whether you have the American Males or Harlem Heat, they're both from America, and this is a flag match. So
okay,
technically you could use either team. And either way, I'd have the Blue Bloods go over. You could have them use the flags as weapons. It makes for an interesting visual. I think it could be fun in that way. And I think whether you're talking about the American Males or Harlem Heat, I think the match would be decent. I think the match would be better if it was the American Males.
Yes, I agree with you because a heel versus heel match there, I don't know if it would technically work. I think a Heat would become the default faces, but yeah,
Right.
the American Nails is much better. And again, you can just in your world that tape delayed match is never aired, or they changed their mind, or it's a phantom title switch that has happened.
Absolutely.
So that's a fandom title switch in your universe. And yeah, the fact that it's a flag match, I think the crowd will get behind the males a lot. I think both these guys are a little green and Bagwell and Riggs, but I think they both sold well at this time. So if you've got the evil guys beating up on them, and again the fact that the Blue Bloods represent Great Britain and Bobby Eaton is from the South, but
Right.
he's the Earl of Eaton at this point, which was
Yeah.
always hilarious to me. I always loved Blue Blood Bobby Eaton. That was always hysterical.
They could have done so
So
much more with it.
yeah, they really could have. There was some vignettes, but they could have done more. So I do love both those guys. They're both, and probably in my top 50 of all time, Eaton and Regal. So giving them the title here and waving the, Union Jack at a hostile Detroit crowd, that's a great visual. That's
Absolutely.
great. All right, so I've got my next match, and it's the U.S. title bout I had announced earlier. Sting, who's the champ, versus Sabu with the Sheik. Now, Sabu is the Sheik's nephew. This is the original Sheik. They're in Detroit. That's why they came in. And they don't necessarily have to work face. I think they're definitely working as heels here against Sting. And instead of Sabu getting a throwaway match against Mr. JL, a meaningful match that shows what he can do. I looked it up. Sting and Sabu never happened. I don't know where it would have aside from this little small window of time here. So I think it just would be neat to say that these two guys had a match. Sting was very athletic, not as athletic at this point as he was earlier before he blew out his knee, but could certainly hang with Sabu, could take his offense. I think Sabu could sell Sting's offense. I think this would be a cool match to see. I think it would be a pretty good match. I don't think it needs to be that long. It could be under 10 minutes and be fine. And then afterwards, I would have Sting win, of course. And then afterwards, I would have the Sheik throw a fireball or whatever and incapacitate Sting so Sting can't help Flair in the tag match. So the commentary would make that clear. Sting can't help to add another wrinkle to that later on. But again, I was trying to figure out, I wanted to put someone different against Sabu. I thought about doing Savage and Sabu. I thought about doing that. So but if he's here, I wanted to give him a meaningful opponent.
Yeah, I agree. I used Sabu with a unique opponent as well. We'll get there. My next match, however, is a trick or treat street fight, and it is between Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo.
Lanny was on the roster.
Pretty much just on the payroll, but
yeah, a lot of people may not know the story. Is that Savage, of course, got Lanny a job, and they had optioned or somehow got the Gorgeous George gimmick, and Lanny was getting himself in really buff shape and had dyed his hair bright blonde, and you can find pictures of him out here during this period, but as WCW would often do, they never called him. He never came in, and he sat at home for I don't know how long and just collected a paycheck.
Right. And, I looked it up, and these two, were tag team partners. They faced each other, but in IWC. So, from what I could tell, it never happened on a main stage. So, and you can probably guess why, they didn't want to do that, different types of star power. Sometimes they were both heels, whatever. I think it would have been great to see brothers face each other here. And I think that they could have had a lot of fun with the stipulation as well. That they would have had chemistry. As I said, they worked together when they were younger. So yeah, that's why I was trying to think of a way to use Savage. And I was like, Lanny Poffo's right there. Why not use it? Would be a memorable match. It would probably be a really good one. So There you go. And if he has blonde hair, oh well.
Yeah. Well, they could have said, hey, we're going to bring you in for something else, cut it and dye it again, whatever, or wash the dye out. Yeah, I mean, I saw that Papa was on the roster. I never thought about using him. I knew the story, of course. But yeah, that's a really neat idea. I don't know. It's like, is Papa a surprise opponent, or does Randy know that he's getting his brother?
Yeah, I think that there's a story leading up to this. It could be either way. Randy Savage, saying, you were always a disgrace to the family. It could be anything.
Yeah,
brothers fight all the time, right?
Yeah, and even though those guys definitely could have had a good match straight up, I like you said, because of who they are and the fact that they get to maybe just have some fun with the stipulation. I like that too. It's because the match itself would be fine, but I think this is the type of thing that would be very memorable. These two guys just cutting up in a match of this nature. So my next bout is the tag match: Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman versus Ric Flair and a mystery opponent chosen by Nick Bockwinkel. And initially, I thought about having Bockwinkel activate himself.
I thought about using him as well.
Because he hadn't wrestled since, I think, 87-ish. But instead, Ric Flair's tag partner is going to be the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Dusty Rhodes hadn't wrestled in about a year, but he was there as a commentator. He would wrestle after this for years yet after this. So, again, Dusty and Flair had such a history with each other over the years. And Anderson, too, he was always against Dusty when they were in the Horsemen. So I think Bockwinkel chooses Dusty, who's in the house, and as an old school wrestler, of course, has his gear with him.
Right.
And would just be, and I think the look on Flair's face when he gets Dusty, would be just amazing. I think it would be shocked, and then he'd be like, "Well, yeah, of course, I've been against Dusty so much to have him with me now. Why not?" And of course, in regular reality, Flair turned on Sting, and you can do that still before the end of the year. I don't think you necessarily need to have Flair turn on Rhodes here. I don't think that would really accomplish much for you. So I would have Flair and Rhodes win, of course. I don't think you can have them lose in this match. So I think it's basically going to be a match where Flair will work the bulk of it against Pillman and Anderson and do very well. And then Dusty will come in and do the flip, flop, and fly and his couple of moves and win. Probably by pinning Arn, because Arn, he'll take the loss to Dusty any day.
Right. Well, you also could have. Pedro Morales was also on the roster.
I saw that, and I didn't remember ever seeing him work.
Right.
A match.
Nick Bockwinkel and Pedro Morales versus Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes.
That sounds like one of the Slamboree Legends reunion matches that they would do. I did look up to see what Pedro was doing at the time. I saw he was on the roster. I don't know if he was working in the back or what, but yeah, I didn't use Pedro Morales.
Yeah, neither did I. My next match is where I use Sabu with the Sheik versus Ric Flair. For similar reasons that you said. A match that, we've not seen happen, and a match that would have been meaningful for Sabu. We're in Detroit. The Sheik is there. I suppose you could have Flair be the heel here. I think, though, that Sting, you said Sting with Sabu, I think that those styles maybe would have meshed better, actually, in thinking about it. But I do think that Flair could have bumped around for Sabu in a really good way. Might not be able to see him do some of the top rope moves to Flair that you saw him do to Mr. JL, for example. But I do think that these two could have a really good, interesting match, which is a combination of two very different styles. And I think it would have been fun to see. Just to say Flair and Sabu faced each other, I think would have been fun. So, yeah,
I agree. Same logic that we both had. Flair and Flair could work with anybody, and I think it's it would be Flair getting Sabu to work his style of match but at the same time allowing Sabu to do the things that Sabu did. Like if you go back and look at, say, Flair versus Sting from the first Clash of the Champions, that's the template you would follow. Flair doing the Flair things, but allowing Sting to do the stuff that he knows would get Sting over.
And,
So I think it would be very similar here with Sabu. And yeah, I think both of our ideas was if Sabu's there, let's do something with him. Let's do something.
Yeah, you
cool.
said Savage as well. I think Savage would have made a really good opponent for him too.
Yes, that was my other thought, was to use Savage, and I decided I like the idea of him and Orndorff together better. But I love that. So next up is my main event, and it's my spin the wheel, make the deal match, and it is going to be a steel cage, and it is going to be Hulk Hogan with Jimmy Hart versus the Giant with Kevin Sullivan, both Hart and Sullivan outside the cage, of course. I do like your idea better of giving the Giant more or less a squash to build him up a little bit. I don't know what you're doing with Hogan yet. But to me, it just seemed like this was the collision point for Giant versus Hogan. So to go ahead and do that. But of course, get rid of all the crazy crap that was around it in real life. A cage match, I think, allows the Green Giant, not the Jolly Green Giant, but the Green Giant, to hide some of that, because in a cage match, it's punching, it's kicking, it's throwing the other dude into the cage, it's some body slams. So and Hogan can sell well until he decides he doesn't want to sell anymore and he hulks up. So I think that you would have a first part of the match that is the Giant looking good, then Hogan comes back, and you can still have some chicanery. You can still have, and I would put the belt on Giant. Let's go ahead. Let's just do it, because of disqualification ending for a pay-per-view, I hate that. So I would probably have Hogan climbing out of the cage, and Jimmy Hart turns and stops him from dropping while Kevin Sullivan helps the Giant get out of the cage door. So I would have the Giant win, and then to send the fans home happy, Hogan can get locked in the cage with Jimmy Hart, the traitor, and body slam Jimmy and give Jimmy the big boot in the leg drop and all that good stuff. So, but I think this is the collision point. It might be early to put the belt on the Giant, but you can take it off of them in quick order to any number of people, to Sting, to Savage, to Hogan again, what have you. But yeah, I think I like the idea of what you did better, but to me, I couldn't think of anything better to do with Hogan and Giant. So I just thought, well, let's just clear away the mess and do a step that they could work.
Yeah, I'm surprised you kept that match, but I like that you made it a cage match, because I do think it would suit the Giant's greenness a little bit more. Now, you mentioned the Jolly Green Giant. Does he come in instead of the Yeti? Or
yes, him with Sprout as the manager.
With Sprout. Oh God. Yeah, no, I do think that this would suit them, and yeah, having Jimmy Hart turn on him would be interesting, and the fact that Giant gets the belt is also, I think, a good, shocking kind of twist to have in the pay-per-view end. And yeah, I mean, I we all wish that Paul White was a little bit more refined at this time. He wasn't, but yeah, I think the way you did it would have made for maybe a more palatable main event.
Yeah. Like I said, I just couldn't think of what else to do with either guy. Like I said, I like what you did with Giant, so we'll see what you do with Hogan.
Yeah, and so my main event is where I utilize the spin the wheel, make the deal, but it is between Hulk Hogan and Dusty Rhodes.
So you pulled Dusty out too.
Yep, I did. And
in my mind, I was trying to figure who you hadn't used yet.
Yeah.
Did you use Orndorff in anything?
No, I didn't. And
okay, because for a minute there, I thought maybe you might finally do the big Orndorff Hogan blow off from 10 years ago.
That would have been a good idea too. So like I said earlier, I thought about using Johnny B. Bad for because when I watched that first match with him in it, I was like, oh wow, he was really holding his own, doing a really good job. The crowd popped for him, as you said. They really reacted, and I was like, gosh, why didn't wouldn't it be fun to use him in a main event slot? But I went away from that because I was like, I can use Johnny B. Bad in a better, more logical way. And Dusty Rhodes is there. Has that match ever happened? To the best of my knowledge, it did not. And yes, Dusty was not the Dusty of old here, but I think just having this match would be something that people wanted to see. You have one of the faces of NWA, WCW, and then you have the longtime face of WWF. Have them face each other for the first time. It could be a face versus face match, but as I said, it's a spin the wheel, make the deal, and it will be a Texas bull rope match. So who does that favor? That obviously favors Dusty.
Dusty, obviously.
That's how you get around the fact that Dusty might not be as agile as he once was. So you have this be, more of a brawl affair. Have some blood there. Hogan is perfectly willing to do blood when he wants to. So I think that he would have done so here. Obviously, you have Hogan go over, but maybe not obviously. One in the back of my head while you were mentioning your main event, Leonard, I thought about maybe using a draw where both guys are just knocked out. And like you have like a rematch of some sort. But you can have Hogan go over here and, it would be a dream match per se, and even though it might not be a 5-star classic dream match, it would be a match that I think would turn heads.
So I looked up real quick here. Dusty Rhodes versus Hulk Hogan happened in 1980 in Japan.
You know what? I might have that box set. I wonder if it's on there.
Okay. But that was so long ago, and it was in Japan.
Hogan was the heel then, most likely.
Yes, most likely he was definitely working heel. That's a great idea, having Hogan Dusty, having it be a bull rope match. I think that's exciting. I think that's different. One thing that I struggled with, and probably you did too, was the fact that the roster was pretty thin at this point.
Yeah.
And again, we're both pulling Dusty Rhodes out of the mothballs for a prime position.
You thought about pulling out Nick Bockwinkel.
Yeah, I did too. I thought about using Bockwinkel as well. But I like this idea. I love the image of just the two of them in the ring. I mean, Dusty was way past his prime here, but again, he continued to work up into the aughts. So I definitely think that at this point, he was, he wasn't as good as he once was, but he was good once as he ever was. I think that saying applied to Rhodes at this point. So I think if you gave him a pay-per-view match against Hogan, a bull rope match, which would hide, a lot of his shortcomings at this point, I think he could get up for it. It's a great idea. Did you say who won?
I would have probably Hogan go over, but you could also have it end in you don't want to end the pay-per-views this way, but you can have it end in a draw.
You mentioned the draw, but I didn't think you were going with the draw.
Or like they're both a bloody mess, and there's no clear-cut winner or something like that. You'd probably have Hogan go over just because it's a dream match, and Dusty is not going to work full time. If he was working full time at this point, I might have him go over. But obviously, this would be kind of like a one-off dream match. So,
sure, yeah. And you know what you could do too, if Dusty is back, is especially if you do like a Clash of the Champions after this, is have Giant go over Rhodes.
Yeah, that's true.
Because again, you continue just to have him season himself on the road to Hogan. So the fact that Hogan beat Dusty, and like you said, Dusty's not going to work a main schedule. But if he's going to be around, that I like that as a Clash of the Champions match.
And being that it's was Dustin Rhodes Gold Dust at this point or not yet?
Yeah, he was not around. I'm trying to think when I believe Gold Dust had debuted by this point.
Yeah, you can have Dusty come out dressed all in gold. Maybe
right.
Maybe not with the face paint, but
in a gold outfit, or he could rock the polka dots.
Oh God, that would be great, but slightly different, just to let people know what it was, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, so instead of being black with yellow polka dots, it would be yellow with black polka dots,
or yellow and red polka dots.
Right, because Hogan had gone to the black at this point to feud with the Dungeon of Doom. So Rhodes takes the Hogan colors.
I love it. I think both of our cards are significantly better than than what the original.
Yes, I think we both had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
The fact that the stipulations that we added, I think, helped the spin the wheel, make the deal, doing something Halloween related. The fact that we were both pulling random dudes out of the mothballs, to be part of it, to shore up the card. A lot of gimmicks. Halloween Havoc, I think, is one of those shows where you can do a lot of that stuff with. You can have fun. I think you can work outside of your main continuity a little bit. This was fun. We talked about either rebooking this show or rebooking the one that had Sting versus Jake Roberts. I can't remember if that was 91 or 92 now, because those are just both notorious main events, regardless of everything else that was on the show. But Halloween Havocs are fun, I think, and we'll definitely, maybe next year, we'll do the Robert Sting one for Halloween. But I like doing this, and I agree with you. I think we both came up with some fun ideas, and I like all the cards that we created.
Yeah, absolutely. Please let us know what you thought of our rebooks. Let us know what you thought of the original pay-per-view if you've seen it. Check out our other videos: random match reviews, stupid questions, what's that card, segment surgery. We're also available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our content. And for Leonard, my name is Chad. We will see you next time.